Welcome, Wanderer. I'm glad you're here. Before we begin, tell me, have you ever wondered why Cyclops have only one eye? Also, tell me what time it is for you, and what city you are from. For complete immersion, close your eyes, relax your body completely, breathe naturally, and cover yourself with a warm blanket. Now the lamplight dims, the room loosens, and a hush like sea cave air opens. Step with me between eyelids and stars where old Greece is still awake. In the hush before names were nailed to mountains, when the world tasted of salt and ash, a spark throbbed inside the dark. The ancients called that spark necessity. Poets later called it fate. From sky and earth came pressures and sighs, and from those pressures came beings as simple as thunder and as complicated as grief. Among them moved the Cyclops, the one-eyed ones, who saw not with half the world missing, but with a gaze honed to a single truth. Their eye was not lack, it was a furnace port, the round door of focus, an ember set in a brow of basalt. Through it they read metals like scripture and storms like handwriting, and what they learned they hammered into the world. To speak of them is to taste metal. The breath smells of iron filings and wet stone, of ram's wool and open fires. Hear the bellows in and out across the caves below the young earth, where lava is a throat and the sea is a listener. Above, constellations invent themselves. Below, hammers decide what kind of songs tomorrow will have. Between these layers, the Cyclops learn their work, and their work becomes law. Forge the hidden, bring the buried into form, and teach sky and sea to share a language. But before they were artisans beneath volcanoes, they were firstborn rumours. From Uranus the sky and Gaia the earth, the stories say came three: Argas of the bright bolt, Brontes of the deep rumble, Steropoims of the cutting flash. The universe had barely learned to hold itself together. Even time walked on unsteady legs. Into that unready hour the three arrived with round, steady pupils, black as cooled obsidian, drinking fire like wells drink rain. They did not blink much. When your sight is a circle of truth, shutters feel like lies. Their gaze bothered the elder gods. It burned too directly, too without permission. An open furnace is not polite at a feast of clouds, so they were hidden away, or bound, or exiled to the workshop islands of the future. Every version agrees on the feeling if not on the map. The feeling is this: an art too honest is frightening. An eye too singular cannot be bribed by the glitter of surfaces, and courts require glitter. The Cyclopes' solitude begins here, in the distance between what is said and what is shaped. Yet solitude is not silence. In caverns that pulse with earth blood, they learn to listen to stone. Basalt speaks slowly, but it speaks, it records the footfall of gods as hairline seams, the tremor of oaths as heat within grains. When the Cyclops lifts a hammer, that hammer answers, and the mountain nods. Sparks fly like small birds trying to become constellations. Each spark remembers a promise, that what is molten today will be shaped tomorrow. That pain, while hot, can be made into a form that saves or warns. Already they have a task. The young thunderer, the child who will be king in a high house, needs a weapon that will match the weather of his will. The Cyclopes craft it without sleep, coiling lightning through metal, teaching it to curve and to return. They add a grip that wants a particular hand and a weight that refuses to be stolen. When they quench it, the steam smells like the first rain after a long fire. Out of that cloud strides Destiny, testing his balance, surprised at the way power behaves when it has a home. Between commissions they tend sheep. People forget this. They imagine only anvils and shouts. But there is wool and milk and the naming of lambs. A giant body must learn gentleness to avoid breaking what it loves. So the Cyclops practices tenderness as a craft. It is not separate from metal, only the other face of it. The single eye lowers to consider a hoofstone caught between toes. The same hand that lifts a hammer can lift a creature no heavier than a kiss. In the meadow, their shadow is a moving tree. Stories move strangely in Greece. One branch says the Cyclopes become the smiths of Hephaestus, whose limp is a kind of wisdom. Another says they herd alone on far islands where travellers may drift. And there another fate once entered, stringing us toward a famous firelit cave. Both can be true if you let the sea write the transitions. The sea makes many lands into one long shoreline, stitched with foam. What matters for now is not which harbour we land in, but the rule that follows us, that a single, faithful sight can either bless the world with craft or terrify it with directness. If you listen closely, you can hear the hinge of the tale. It may sound like wind through olives, or like the slow drum of surf against a cliff that keeps its counsel. The hinge is choice. Not just theirs, but ours in telling. Shall we look with one eye or many? Will we concentrate and change, or scatter and forget? The Cyclops arrives in our dreams to ask that. Their lid opens, their breath smells of wool and sparks. What they fear is not blindness, it is the wasting of flame on things that do not endure. Tonight we walk the galleries of the underworld forges, and we walk the pastures above them, two worlds sharing one hearth. Remember this as the story travels. A single circle of sight, like a full moon, can rule a night if the clouds allow it. Remember also the price of such purity. Others distrust a gaze that refuses to flatter. When next we lift the curtain on their beginnings, we will find debts accruing and alliance a hardening around the heat, and an island waiting like a closed eye that will open to judge the unprepared. Let the sparks whisper their quiet vows tonight. In the cooled hush, the sparks finish their vows and drift into ash. Yet the heat beneath the mountain continues, patient as a heartbeat that has chosen a long life. The Cyclops straighten their backs within the caverns and let the stones settle around them like a cloak. In that dim, their single eyes hold steady, a round door through which purpose travels. They speak little, because their breath is work. They remember much, because memory is a bellows. If the world above forgets beginnings, the caves remember. Before kings made palaces from cloud and decree, the sky pressed too tightly on the earth, and in that pressure the first children were hidden. Uranus feared the peculiar truthfulness of a gaze that refused to split into distraction. He saw in the Cyclops a mirror that did not flatter, so he buried them under heavy locks of night, in deeps where voices turn back and names cannot float. Yet even then, the round eye kept its ember. It stared into the black and did not lose itself, and in their pupils small constellations practiced being stars. Gaia, who knows the inwardness of stone, kept count of each spark her sons were owed. When the hour of change arrived, it wore the stride of a youth with thunder in his lungs. He descended not as a jailer, but as one who had long listened to distant hammers and finally found their door. Their single stairs weighed him. A pact was felt, made not in words but in the tilting of light between faces. We will grant you tools that fit your fate. You will grant us air and time. Freedom is an anvil for the self. They cooled their breath, then built a fire that answered their pulse. For the youth who freed them, they forged the bolt, a river of light taught to be held, a migrating storm persuaded to nest in a hand. They smelted it from cloud bone and horizon ore, from eagle cry and rain not yet fallen. Each strike of the hammer stitched night to day. When they quenched the metal, the water sang like valley learning its echo, and the bolt remembered that it must return to the palm it loved. For the brother who keeps the seas in order, they sang into shape a trident whose prongs parted waters and braided them again. It learned the languages of current and riptide, and it could persuade coastlines to rethink their posture. For the unseen brother, they raised a helm in which absence became a garment. When he wore it, the world failed to count him. Each gift was an answer to a need, and each need was a letter in the Cyclopean alphabet of craft. Why one eye? The mind keeps asking, like surf returning to its rock, because a furnace has one mouth, and truth arrives best through a single aperture, because focus is mercy in a world too full of glittering corridors. The Cyclops does not avert. The Cyclops does not glance away to gather witnesses. Within that round pupil, temptations lose costume, metals declare impurities, oaths confess hidden hinges. Such vision cost reputation and rewards endurance. Above the forges, the meadows still require kindness. The same hands that coax bolts from raw heaven move with gravity, among ewes and rams, checking hooves, lifting lambs from bramble. The giants step wide, sparing herbs that live between stones. Milk foams in clay bowls, and smoke goes out to inform the sky that peace is still a possible arrangement. Sometimes the youth who now hurls weather visits, sitting quietly while evening gathers its blue. He sets the bolt across his knees and listens to rams crop the dusk. There are other kinds of Cyclopes as islands sketch themselves along the sea's edge, cousins of craft and of pasture. On one stony shore, a solitary herdsman learns to weigh desire against law, and someday a guest with a cunning name will teach him measure. The rumour of that future coils already in the breakers, but for now it keeps its distance, like a sail line that will be pulled when the wind is right. Destiny does not hurry. It arrives with the tide exactly when the moon allows. The gods, changeable as weather and stubborn as bedrock, come to depend on the one-eyed makers. When a temple requires a hinge that will never lie, a Cyclops is asked to look at it and pronounce the soul of the metal. When an oath must be bound to a city, a Cyclops stamps the seal, for their gaze persuades promises to stand up straight. They are paid in ore, in hides, in salt, and the rare pleasure of being left alone to complete a thought. Respect arrives slowly, like a glacier that never forgets its destination. Sometimes the mountain remembers the old chains and shudders. In those moments, the Cyclopes listen to the stone until it calms. They have befriended the pressure that once oppressed them. A blade refines itself by surviving both fire and water. A maker refines himself by surviving both exile and welcome. Their single eyes, once feared for directness, now appear to some as a blessing, a moon that rises where obfuscation cannot grow. Night after night, the sparks fly and settle, each a star rehearsing a brief career. The meadows breathe. The sea thinks of its various names. The caves glow like hearts dreaming. In that harmony, the Cyclopes keep building the world's grammar. If far away, an island practices its silence for a future conversation, the forges do not argue. They are patient. They know the tide's arithmetic. The hinge of the tale continues to turn, oiled by focus, and somewhere a ram stamps its foot as if answering a thought the mountain has just had. The ram's hoof against stone lingers in the dusk like punctuation, a sound that tells the earth it has been understood. The Cyclopes lift their heads at it, their brows lit faintly by embers, and in that pause the world inhales. The caves glow on, the meadows sway under stars, and in both places the one-eyed giants keep a balance, never letting either fire or flock claim them fully. To watch them is to see an axis on which myth turns. Their very posture teaches that strength is nothing without patience, and patience nothing without strength. Yet patience is tested when the elder gods, fickle and ferocious, demand more than tools. They want allegiance. They want submission dressed as service. The Cyclopes answer with their hammers, which speak louder than words. Still, the eye sees what cannot be hammered away, envy. For every bolt of lightning they craft, for every trident they sharpen, suspicion grows. Why should such giants, born of earth and sky, hold so much power over the fate of divine weapons? Jealousy walks softly, but it always arrives. Uranus had feared their gaze, but others learned to fear their forge. A rumour takes root among Olympian halls, whispering that one day the one-eyed makers might forge not for gods but for themselves. The Cyclopes hear the rumour in the tremor of stone, for rocks repeat every secret. They do not protest, they let the suspicion settle like silt, knowing truth needs no defence. Yet truth is also heavy, and heavy truths eventually bend the world. Their solitude deepens. They choose to spend more time in volcanic hollows where the air tastes of sulphur and the rivers run red with ore. The single eye glows brighter in the dark, like a lantern hung for no one's arrival. When they lift their hammers, sparks flash across the cavern roof, constellations rehearsing their brief lives. Each spark could be mistaken for joy, but inside the Cyclops it feels more like endurance. Joy requires company. Endurance can work alone. Still, the eye is not without longing. It scans the meadows with tenderness, tracing the curve of ram's horns, the silver of dew on grass. It wonders at families it has never known, at kinship more subtle than that between god and servant. The Cyclops imagines a gaze meeting its own without flinching, another eye or two that would not fear the directness. This longing is quiet, rarely admitted even to the self, but it colours the way they touch the lambs, the way they repair fences, the way they sing to the wind at dusk. Singularity has weight. To have one eye is to live always in the truth of focus, never softened by second thoughts. There is no sideways glance to blur responsibility. A thing seen is a thing remembered, and a thing remembered must be reckoned with. The Cyclops cannot pretend not to notice cruelty, nor can it easily ignore betrayal. This is their gift and their curse. Gods envy the strength, mortals will one day dread it, and yet the Cyclops themselves only wish to keep their sight aligned with purpose. Time shifts. The young thunderer grows into his throne, seas bow to the trident, invisibility drapes itself across hidden kingdoms. The Cyclopes fade from ceremony into necessity, called forth only when something must be made that no one else can fashion. Their names become murmurs, Arges, Brontes, steropes, like prayers muttered at the edge of storms, and yet they endure, for endurance is their true craft. A hammer may rest, a forge may cool, but focus persists. Beneath Mount Etna, under smoke that curls like script against the sky, they labour for Hephaestus, whose limp teaches him the crooked way of balance. Together they coax weapons from ore, not only arms of war but chains that hold promises and ornaments that fasten oaths. Sparks shower down, catching in their beards, glowing briefly before vanishing. Each spark is a fragment of their vision, a reminder that even fleeting fire can mark eternity if witnessed well. But on the edges of the sea, a different story stirs. There are Cyclops who do not forge for gods but live among sheep, tending flocks without anvils, shaping their days with bread, milk, and solitude. These herdsman giants are cousins in spirit, sharing the round eye, the breadth of back, the strange mixture of gentleness and terror. In their caves, the fire is for warmth, not for forging, yet their focus remains, unsettling to those who wander uninvited. They look upon strangers without blinking, and strangers feel the weight of being entirely seen. One such herdsman waits on an island already humming with prophecy. His cave smells of curdled milk and smoke. His rams wander freely, and the sea gnaws at the rocks with a patient hunger. He is not a maker of bolts or tridents, but of a different fate, one that will cross the path of cleverness disguised as weakness. His name will echo in poems sung by sailors and scholars alike, a name bound forever with cunning and cruelty. For now he waits, unaware that destiny is setting sails toward his lonely shore. The hoofbeats of sheep sound steady against the cave floor, like a drum rehearsing for a tale yet to unfold. The Cyclops in the pasture lifts his head and listens to the sea. In the rhythm of surf and bleating, he hears a visitor approaching, though no sails yet line the horizon. The round eye narrows, not in suspicion but in recognition of a future drawing near. The mountain exhales smoke, the meadow exhales breath, the sea exhales foam. Everything waits, balanced at the moment before encounter, as if the world itself were holding its gaze in one unblinking eye. The sea holds its breath as though it too waits for the shape of a sail to break its horizon. Within the cave, the herdsman Cyclops moves among his rams, brushing coarse wool with a hand heavy as stone, yet tender as twilight. The single eye burns steady, a coal in the dark, neither cruel nor kind but exacting, unwilling to dilute truth with distraction. In the stillness of his solitude, he feels no need for mirrors, no need for praise. His life is counted in lambs born, cheeses set to cure, fires coaxed to life against the damp, and the long conversations of waves that never tire of repeating themselves. The cave is large, arched by nature like a temple before temples were conceived. Walls traced by smoke, floor worn by hoof and heel. Against the rear wall jars line up like sentinels filled with milk thickened into curd. Overhead the ceiling weeps drops of water that strike the stone in rhythms older than any lyre. Outside the meadows slope to the cliffs, where salt spray whitens the rocks. His world is self-sufficient, answering only to sky and flock, and in that sealed rhythm the Cyclops feels whole. Yet destiny rarely allows wholeness to remain untouched, even as he bends to lift a lamb caught in thorns. Beyond the curve of the sea, a ship steers closer, carrying men whose hunger is larger than their caution. They will bring with them names that have travelled far, songs that pretend to be truths, and a cunning that sharpens itself on the whetstone of survival. The Cyclops cannot yet see them, but his eye, tuned to omens, feels the shift. The air thickens as if the island itself prepares to host a story that will not end quickly. The gods above stir too, though from their heights such encounters seem like passing storms. Yet the Cyclops, whether smiths beneath mountains or herdsmen beside the sea, feel these stirrings as tremors in their bones. Each one-eyed gaze, though solitary, belongs to a lineage that threads through both fire and pasture. The makers of thunderbolts sense the same future as the shepherd giant does, a resonance like iron striking iron across distances. Focus, it seems, binds them all, wherever they dwell. The herdsman Cyclops lifts his face to the stars. They shine indifferent, yet his eye gathers their cold light and softens it, turning it inward as if storing memory. He wonders whether the gods ever envy his simplicity, whether they, with their counsels and betrayals, might sometimes long for the straight line of a gaze unbroken by choice. He does not phrase it so. His mind works in images. He sees a lamb standing without falter, a river running without fork, a fire burning without smoke, That is what his eye desires, directness, unmarred by guile. But guile approaches on the sea breeze. Sails draw nearer, stitched of mortal hands, carrying voices that will soon echo against the cave walls. The Cyclops cannot imagine yet the pain that cleverness can inflict, nor how his single eye will become both shield and target. For now he tends his fire, he turns his cheeses, he hums a tune that has no words but keeps the flock at peace. The cave grows warm, and smoke writes unreadable verses along the vault of stone. Elsewhere his kin hammer still beneath volcanoes. Unaware of how their cousin solitude will soon be pierced by story, they beat bronze into shapes that remember thunder. They stoke furnaces with winds stolen from storm. Their eyes glow orange with reflection, each iris a tiny forge. They do not know that a new kind of tale is about to shadow their shared name. A tale not of gifts to gods, but of vengeance and trickery, sung in halls by men who fear giants yet admire wit. The night stretches long. The island hushes its insects. The sea folds its waves into softer rhythms, and the Cyclops lies among his sheep, the weight of their wool against his side like the comfort of kin. His breathing slows, his eye closes but never fully, a half-lidded watch that keeps darkness honest. In his sleep, he dreams of fire without smoke, of stone without fracture, of gaze without interruption. He dreams as if the world could remain this steady. But the horizon is already changing. By dawn, strange footprints will press the sand, and strange hands will reach for berries that do not belong to them. The Cyclops will meet mortals who look with two eyes, but see less than he does with one, and in their meeting, truth will clash with cunning, and cunning will claim the song, leaving truth to echo only in caves. For now the cave exhales warmth, the meadow exhales dew, and the sea exhales foam. All three join into a lullaby older than memory, carrying the Cyclops gently through the last hours of undisturbed solitude. Somewhere in that melody lies a note of warning, a note he has not yet heard but soon will, when dawn lifts its pale eye over the restless horizon. Dawn climbs quietly, spilling pale fire over the cliffs, gilding the fleece of rams still drowsing in the pasture. The Cyclops wakes with the smell of smoke in his beard and the press of stone beneath his shoulder. He blinks once, a long slow motion, and the eye opens fully, catching the first light like a polished shield. He rises and moves among his sheep, counting them by habit, not with numbers but with memory, knowing each curve of horn and cadence of bleat. Nothing seems amiss at first, yet the air bears attention, a salt more restless than before. By the time the sun climbs higher, the strangers have stepped upon the shore. Their sandals cut strange lines in the sand, their shadows long, their voices hushed as if the very cliffs demanded secrecy. Hunger drives them inland, toward the caves that smell of milk and wool. They do not yet know whose home they approach, nor do they measure the scale of the giant whose footsteps beat like drums upon the earth. The Cyclops continues his tending, unaware of the eyes upon him, though his own gaze will soon rest upon theirs with the full weight of truth. The cave is cool when he enters again, arms burdened with wood for the hearth. He sets it down, strikes flame, and the fire leaps obediently. Its glow runs along the walls, illuminating jars stacked like low towers, cheeses resting in rows, and in the far shadow the figures of men who do not belong. He does not startle. Startlement is a thing of smaller hearts. He stares, the eye wide and unblinking, drinks them in, and they feel the exactness of being measured. For them it is unbearable. For him it is simple. A host should know who trespasses in his hall. They speak, quick words layered with supplication and cunning. They claim the rights of guests, the laws of Zeus that guard the traveller. Yet this giant's life is not ruled by the Olympian's decrees. His law is older, cut from stone, carved in the bleating of rams and the rhythm of tides. Hospitality is known to him, but it bends to his scale, not theirs. He asks nothing of them with speech. The silence itself is a question. What are you to me, and why should I feed what has crept into my cave unbidden? The men falter under that gaze. Two eyes might allow diversion, might let one wander while the other pretends concern, but one eye gives no escape. They are caught as surely as iron in the forge, and the air trembles with the weight of judgment. Hunger gnaws at them, fear clutches them, yet among them stands one whose mind sharpens with every heartbeat, a man who knows that wit may be sharper than any blade, and sharper still when turned upon a giant who sees too directly. He watches the Cyclops, studying the rhythm of his movements, the swell of his chest, the power in his shoulders, and already he begins to weave a plan. The Cyclops, meanwhile, tends to his fire. He places the wood carefully, arranges the flames as though they are rams needing order. He sits upon a stone, his presence filling the chamber like a mountain moved indoors. He speaks at last, voice deep as caverns, more rumble than tone. He does not ask their names in welcome. He asks them what they mean to him. His words are sparse, stripped of ornament, each syllable like a stone placed on a path. The men answer with trembling voices, and the clever one among them answers with half-truths shaped into politeness. Hospitality here is not feasts and gifts. It is survival granted or denied. The Cyclops considers, and his eye fixes upon them with the stillness of judgment. In that gaze lies not cruelty, but the relentless demand for honesty, and yet the men, bound by fear, give him guile. The clash is inevitable, one eye of truth against two eyes of trickery. Already the lines of the tale are being carved. Outside, the sea presses its waves against the island with greater insistence, as though echoing the rising tension. The sheep stir uneasily, their bleats sharp in the air. The cave darkens as the fire bends low, smoke curling in uneasy spirals. The Cyclops lowers his hand to a jar of milk, draws it up and drinks deeply, the liquid running down his beard. He sets it aside with a sound like stone dropped upon stone. Then he leans forward, his gaze narrowing, and the men feel themselves drawn into that round, unyielding eye. They do not yet know the price of trespass, nor how far cunning will be tested against focus. For now the cave is full of smoke and silence, broken only by the sound of rams stamping their hooves outside. The Cyclops breathes in, breathes out, and the chamber seems to move with him, as though the mountain itself were alive. Soon choices will be made that none can recall without trembling, and the songs of mortals will carry this encounter across centuries. But for the moment, all hangs still, balanced between fire and silence, between truth and guile, awaiting the strike that will tilt the story forward. The silence deepens until it feels like a substance, thick enough to press against the intruder's skin. The Cyclops sits unmoving, a boulder with breath, his single eye glowing faintly with the reflection of firelight. The men shift, but their movements sound louder than they intend. Small scratches against stone, amplified by fear. He inhales, long and deliberate, pulling the air through his chest as though measuring its weight. When he exhales, the flame flickers, and the smoke bends toward the strangers, as if even the fire seeks to learn their names. The clever one among them speaks again, shaping words like clay, soft enough to bend, firm enough to hold. He speaks of need, of hunger, of the laws of Zeus that guard wayfarers. But the Cyclops is no subject of Olympian decrees. His law is carved into cliff and sheepfold, in the rhythm of seasons that no god can rewrite. To him, these men are not guests sanctified by thunder's command, but intruders who crossed boundaries without asking the land's permission. His eye fixes upon them without malice, yet without mercy, and the truth of their trespass hangs in the chamber like a scent. He rises then, his body filling the cave, his shadow stretching over them. The movement is slow, deliberate, as if he carries the weight of mountains in each muscle. He takes one step, then another, until his breath can be felt upon their faces. The round pupil narrows, not in anger but in precision, as though he were choosing where to place his hammer. The men tremble, and even the clever one feels the gravity of that stare pressing into him like a stone pressing into sand. At last the Cyclops speaks again, his voice a cavern opening. He declares that he cares nothing for Zeus, nor for laws written in heavens he does not consult. His world is simple. What enters his cave belongs to him. The words fall heavy, like verdicts already carved. The strangers caught in that rule cannot protest. Their voices would break before they reached his ear. In their silence, the Cyclops turns toward his flock, as if to reassure them that order still reigns. But when he looks back, the weight of decision remains, and decision demands an act. He reaches for one of the intruders with a hand broad as a door. The man cries out, but the sound is brief, swallowed by the cavern. The Cyclops lifts him easily, studies him as one might study a branch before feeding it to the fire, and then carries out his law with a terrible calm. The others shudder, their two eyes wide, unable to look away yet unable to comprehend the directness of his truth. To the Cyclops it is not cruelty but necessity. What lives in his cave sustains him, and he will not starve for the sake of a law that was never his. The clever one does not cry out. His gaze sharpens further, already measuring, already weaving threads of strategy through the terror. He sees not just the giant, but the patterns of his movements, the rhythm of his tasks. He notices how the Cyclops tends his sheep with gentleness, how he seals the cave with a massive stone no man could move, how he drinks deeply and trusts in his own strength. These observations become his tools, as real as any sword, though forged in thought rather than fire. The night falls heavy outside. Stars prick the dark like nails in velvet, and the sea hammers the cliffs with a steady hand. Inside, the cave glows red with flame, smoke curling like words unspoken. The Cyclops lies down among his sheep, his breathing deep, his single eye closing not entirely but enough to rest. Around him the men gather in whispers, their fear cloaked by the sound of rams shifting on straw. The clever one crouches, tracing the lines of possibility in the dust with his finger, as though writing the plan before the gods themselves. The Cyclops dreams of pasture. In his sleep, the eye behind the lid glows faintly, seeing visions of endless meadows where rams graze in peace and no intruder steps unbidden. He does not dream of guile, for guile has no place in a single eye. His dreams are direct, unbroken, an endless plane of clarity. Yet while he dreams, guile sharpens itself nearby, waiting for the moment when focus can be pierced, not with strength but with wit. The cave breathes with them all, giant, sheep, strangers and flame. Its walls hold the sound of hooves, the faint sobbing of men, the rumble of the Cyclops' sleep. Above, the mountain exhales smoke into the night, a signal to stars that change has already begun. For even in the stillness, the story leans forward, pulled toward a confrontation between truth and cunning. The hoof of a ram stamps once against stone, a signal like a heartbeat, and the clever one raises his head, knowing the moment of choice is nearing. The cave's breath grows shallow as the clever one lifts his head, and the pattern of the night reveals itself like grain in polished wood. He knows the boulder at the mouth cannot be moved by men, knows also that strength must be turned rather than met. He moves among his companions like a tide passing piled rocks, touching each with a steadying hand. In whispers shaped to fit the cavern's patience, he unrolls a plan made of 3 materials: time, fire, and the giant himself. When the Cyclops stirs, he rises to tend his flock, rolling the great stone aside just enough to let sheep pour out in a woolly river, then sealing it again with a simplicity that has never learned doubt. By watching, the men learn how morning breathes here. The rams go first, the ewes follow, and the round eye, still heavy with sleep, brightens when it meets the day. No guard but his presence, no locks but stone, and the certainty that no mortal can lift it. The clever one counts not animals but beats of habit, a metronome only he can hear. He begins with courtesy. From a skin he has kept against despair, he draws out dark wine, a night within night, harvested from slopes that remember cicadas and prayers. He holds it before the giant with both hands, offering not a bribe but a bridge. The Cyclops studies the gift with that circular truth that makes flinching impossible. He sniffs, tastes, and a slow light enters his face, astonishment braided with pleasure. The liquid carries summer into the cave. It loosens the knots of caution that solitude ties. He drinks again, deeper, and his voice rounds toward contentment, the rumble smoothing into weather fit for grazing. He asks with the curiosity that loneliness breeds for the giver's name. The clever one fashions a name out of mist, a name that cannot be caught with a hand. He names himself as no one at all, a word that leaves no footprint and yet fills the room. While the Cyclops dozes into warmth, the men turn to the olive trunk set near the pen, a club he cut to guide the king of rams. It is thick heartwood seasoned by smoke, longer than any mortal spear. They set it upon the coals to harden, turning it slowly so heat will teach it discipline. The cave supplies the rest. Embers for tempering, stone for grinding, water for the hissing quench. The clever one feels an old reverence for craft rise in him, an echo of kinship with those other Cyclopes who live beneath mountains. He shapes the point until it gleams dull and patient, then hides it beneath dung and straw where warmth will keep its purpose awake. Evening leans down. The sheep return in waves of fleece, sea answering shore, pleased by the wine's gentle storm. The Cyclops herds them in and seats the great stone firm. He eats, he drinks a last time, and sings in a voice like weather over cliffs. simple notes that learned their path from wind. The single eye shines like a round window lit within. To it the world is clear. Cave, flock, strangers who have brought sweetness, and a sleep that waits like a patient guest. When the song dwindles, he folds himself among the rams. The air is rich with milk and smoke, with the clean balm of lanolin and the iron tang of tools not yet confessed. The clever one lays a hand upon the hidden stake and feels it pulse with stored heat, a sunbeam disciplined into wood. He knows the act he plans will scar the tale so deeply that its line will never fade. He also knows it is the only hinge that can turn this door. The Cyclops, in wine-soft sleep, dreams again of meadows, but the grasses ripple now with a different wind. In the dream, lambs wear crowns of olive leaves. The moon hangs low, a sister eye, a river of fire runs through the pasture, and does not burn. He mutters once, not a word but a sound like a rock, settling. His hand finds the fleece of a favourite ram and stills. Midnight gathers its coins of silence. The men steel themselves, hearts knocking like knuckles on a closed gate. They move as if each bone were wrapped in wool. The clever one leads them toward the sleeper, the stake borne at shoulder height, glowing sullenly beneath its ash coat. He meets the open space where the eye waits behind its lid and breathes, long and even, as if to share calm with the weapon. For a heartbeat he pities the giant, whose life has been nothing but focus and pasture. Then necessity hardens pity, as the fire hardens wood. When the lid lifts and the round truth looks again, it will meet fire narrowed to a point. But not yet. There is still the gathering of courage like dry kindling, the feeling of invisible hands from all old stories pressing upon this one. The Cyclops turns in sleep, and the cave turns with him, a planet about its sun. The tip smokes faintly, the rams sigh. Outside, the sea rehearses sorrow on the shore, a rhythm that remembers both making and undoing. The night yields its final hesitation. With a quiet, almost ceremonial, the men take their places. The clever one sets the point to the place that has judged without flinching. Breath aligns, will aligns, time aligns. Focus meets focus. The single eye of a giant, the single point of a weapon. In that poised instant, the island seems to hold its own gaze upon itself, as though learning for the first time what it means both to be seen and to be altered by the very light that sees. Somewhere beneath the mountain, hammers pause as if listening. Above, a cold star steadies. The stake waits for signal drawn from breath alone. The breath of men tightens. The weight of the cavern presses in. And then the stake descends. It strikes with a sound like a tree splitting in storm, like lightning driven into wood. Fire leaps from the olive heart, a hiss of sap and ember, and the single eye bursts open to meet the point. A cry tears the cave, vast as mountains cracking, deep as waves against a cliff. Sheep scatter, rams stampede, jars topple and shatter, milk spilling like rivers of white sorrow across the floor. The Cyclops thrashes, the world thrashes with him. His hand claws at the stake, tearing at it, wrenching it free, but the damage is done. The clear circle that once drank truth is now a cavern of smoke and flame. He bellows again, a sound that sends seabirds into midnight flight. The men cling to stone, their ears ringing, their hearts unmoored. Yet in that storm of pain the clever one stands steady, his face lit by the blaze of the act. For him it is survival. For the giant it is a sundering. The Cyclops staggers to his knees, his hand pressed against the ruin of his sight. Blood and fire mingle, dripping onto straw and wool. The smell sharp, unbearable. He cries out for his brothers, for others of his kind scattered across the island, their own caves distant, but their blood still kin. He shouts that no one has done this, repeating the name given to him. And so when the others answer across the cliffs, they hear only confusion. If no one harms you, they call, then bear it alone. for no one cannot be fought, and so the herdsman is left with his agony. Abandoned by the very law of words, he rages, but within the rage lies bewilderment. The eye that never learned guile has been pierced not by strength, but by cunning. His world, once direct as pasture and fire, is now fractured, darkened, uncertain. He feels the presence of men around him, but cannot pin them with sight. He hears the bleating of sheep, the scurrying of feet, the whisper of stone dust falling, but none of it aligns into clarity. For the first time, his focus is broken. The law of his body, the circle of his gaze, has been undone. The night drags like a chain. He rolls the great stone aside, groping with hands wide as gates, intending to trap them as they flee. He sits at the entrance, body blocking the path, one hand stroking the rams as they press close, the other ready to feel the shape of men among the wool. He will not let them leave. His law still holds, if only by touch. The sheep bleat, unsettled, sensing their master's confusion. Each time a ram nudges forward, the Cyclops lets it pass, feeling its fleece, patting it with rough affection, letting it out into the night. His hand lingers longer than before, searching, uncertain, but never finding more than wool and horn. Inside, the clever one shapes another plan, a thought spun of patience and fleece. He whispers to his men, and together they bind themselves beneath the broad bodies of the rams, gripping tight to the wool, hiding in the warmth and smell of the flock. The cave grows tense, filled with the mingling of man and beast, each breath a prayer not to betray itself. The Cyclops, blind and raging, waits at the mouth, his hand the only judge left to him. He strokes each back, feels the horns, murmurs once to the ram he loves most, the leader of his herd, the one he trusts as a shepherd trusts the star that guides him. When dawn spills pale fire into the cave, the procession begins. One by one, the rams move past him, each received by his searching palm. Beneath them cling the men, hearts pounding against the ribs of beasts, faces pressed into wool damp with dew. The clever one clings hardest of all beneath the king of rams, whose breath steams in the chill of morning. The Cyclops lingers on this ram, stroking it long, whispering through his teeth that it seems slower today, heavier, as though it carried sorrow in its fleece. He sighs and lets it pass, trusting still in the only honesty left to him, the weight of wool beneath his hand. The flock spills out into the meadow, carrying with it not only lambs and rams, but fate itself. The Cyclops, left behind in shadow, feels the absence like a wound deeper than his eye. He turns back into the cave, alone with the fragments of his law, alone with the silence of jars broken and the fire dying low. His voice rises one last time to the sky, calling vengeance down upon the one who named himself no one. He prays not to Zeus, not to strangers' gods, but to Poseidon, shaker of earth and father of the sea, who knows the strength of giants and the weight of waves. The prayer is raw, unornamented, direct as pain itself. Let this man never find safe harbour. Let his journey be storm and ruin. Outside, the men slip free of the rams and run low across the sand toward their ship, their breath sharp in the dawn. They push the hull into surf, boards groaning, and leap aboard with oars already striking water. The clever one stands at the stern, his gaze fixed not on the horizon, but on the dark mouth of the cave receding behind. He feels the pull of pride, the urge to name himself truly, to hurl his identity back across the water like a stone. The men plead with him to remain silent, but pride is its own current, and his voice rises, carrying across the surf, announcing not no one but his real name. The Cyclops hears, and though his world is now blind, his ear drinks the sound like fire. He calls again to his father, naming the enemy, sealing the prayer with certainty. The sea listens, and beneath its calm surface a tremor begins. The ship slides farther from shore, but the echo of that cry will follow it over leagues, riding upon every wave. In the cave the giant sits with head bowed, one hand upon the fleece of a ram, the other pressed to the hollow where sight once lived. He rocks slowly, not in weakness but in rhythm, as if keeping time with an old broken song. Outside, the tide climbs, carrying both mortals and curses toward horizons that do not forget. The tide bears the ship outward, its oars biting the foam with urgency, yet behind them the voice of the Cyclops still lingers, heavy as stone cast into water. His cry to the sea god coils beneath the waves, moving with the secret certainty of a prayer that will be answered. The men hunch low in the vessel, fearing not only the wrath of storms but the memory of that single blazing eye now darkened. The clever one holds the tiller, his jaw tight, his name echoing in the air like a boast that cannot be recalled. Pride has flung it across the gulf, and the sea has caught it. In the cave, the blinded herdsman sits with his back against the wall, his breath uneven, his hand stroking the ram that lingers faithfully beside him. Pain thrums through his skull. Yet deeper than pain lies bewilderment. His world had always been direct. Every truth met with a gaze that could not look away. Now truth escapes him, hides in shadows he cannot pierce. He feels diminished not only in strength, but in certainty. To live with one eye was never a wound. It was focus, the circle through which the world clarified. To live with no eye at all is exile from that clarity. Yet his heart is not extinguished. He listens to the shuffling of hooves, to the gentle sigh of his flock pressing close. They have not abandoned him, though men. Their wool brushes his hand. Their warmth surrounds him, and in their presence he remembers that he still belongs to earth and pasture. Even as the sea carries away his vengeance, he murmurs to them, words not meant for gods, words that are more breath than meaning, a litany to hold the silence at bay. The ram lowers its head against his knee, and in that gesture the Cyclops feels less alone. Far across the island, his kin hear fragments of his cry. They puzzle at the words, the strangeness of no one, and the silence that followed. Some shake their heads, returning to their herds, while others beat fists upon stone in frustration that kinship could not aid him. Their one eyes burn in the dark, restless with anger and pity. Yet the law of solitude keeps them from uniting. Each Cyclops lives by his own hearth, under his own cliff, answerable to no king but his hunger and his sheep. Even in kinship, they are alone. The smiths beneath mountains hear it too, though faintly, carried through veins of rock. At their anvils they pause, listening to the echo of pain that is not theirs but feels familiar. Sparks drift down like falling stars, and for a moment the forges grow quiet. They remember their own chains, the mistrust of gods who once feared their gaze. They know how swiftly honor turns to suspicion, how strength admired one day can be cursed the next. In their silence lies sympathy, though they return to their hammers, shaping weapons that will arm the very gods who allow their kin to suffer. The clever one, guiding his ship, does not yet feel the full weight of what he has loosed. He sees only the open sea, the horizon wide and beckoning. But the sea is never empty. Beneath its glitter, currents twist toward vengeance. Poseidon, lord of the deep, hears the call of his son, and though he sits among caverns of coral and halls of pearl, his heart stirs with wrath. The insult is not only to blood, but to the sanctity of his waters, for ships should glide only by his leave. Already waves begin to change their rhythm, preparing storms that will test the clever one's boast. In this widening story, the Cyclops becomes more than a figure of pasture. His blinded face is remembered, his cry repeated, his curse carried. Men will tell it as a warning that wit can defeat brute force, that cunning can slip past truth. Yet within the tale lies another truth, quieter, easily missed. The Cyclops did not fall because he was one-eyed, but because he trusted too purely in directness. He believed that what entered his cave was his, that law was simple, that honesty was enough. He never imagined that men might wear names like masks, might cloak their will in the word no one. His downfall is not in having one eye, but in believing one eye could see all. Even so, he remains a presence larger than defeat. The island still carries his steps, The cliffs still echo his voice. Travelers whisper when passing near, pointing to smoke that drifts strangely, to boulders that bear the mark of hands too large for men. The Cyclops endures not only as a story of loss, but as a reminder of focus, of vision that once could not be swayed. The round eye may be gone, yet its image burns in memory, the circle of flame against the dark. Night falls again upon the cave. The Cyclops leans against stone, his ram beside him, the silence broken only by waves grinding the shore. He rocks slowly, like a mountain breathing, his thoughts sinking into depths beyond words. The sea listens, carrying his prayer farther than sight, to places where gods walk unseen. Out on the horizon, the Clever One's ship slips farther into shadow, unaware that every oar stroke deepens the bond between his fate and the giant's curse. The island sleeps, but its silence is heavy, the kind that waits for storms. In the dark, the Cyclops raises his head once more, his empty gaze turned towards sound alone. He listens, and though he cannot see, he feels the weight of the story continuing without him, carried on waves, carried in whispers, carried in the steady patience of gods. The cave cools, its fire reduced to ash, yet the air remains heavy with smoke and sorrow. The Cyclops leans his head against the wall, tracing the ridges of stone with his hand, as though reading a script only touch can decipher. His ram lies beside him, its breath steady, its presence a tether to the earth. Blindness has stripped him of focus, but not of being. Within his chest, the heart still keeps rhythm, and with each beat he remembers, he is son of sea and stone, not erased but altered. Outside, dawn returns, washing the island in pale light. The meadows glisten with dew, the cliffs shine wet where waves climb and fall. The flock spreads out, searching grass with patient muzzles, and the island breathes as if nothing has changed. Yet within the cave the air holds a different weight. The Cyclops knows the land by sound now, the rustle of leaves, the clatter of pebbles, the far cry of gulls wheeling. What he cannot see, he imagines with painful clarity, for imagination fills the void where certainty once ruled. The name of the Clever One rolls in his mind like a stone in surf. Odysseus! Now he has it. He mutters it again and again, shaping it with lips cracked by salt, each syllable a brand pressed into memory. He cannot pursue, cannot strike, but he can remember, and in remembrance lies a weapon sharper than any spear. Memory carried into prayer becomes curse, and a curse once given to a god of waves becomes tide and storm. Already he feels it moving through the water, a current he cannot guide but can trust. The ram stirs, pressing its head against his hand. He strokes it slowly, remembering how often it bore him through meadow, how its fleece shone brightest in sunlight. Now it is more than flock, more than beast. It is witness. To it he speaks quietly, confessing not his rage but his bewilderment. Why did cunning triumph over focus? Why should guile outweigh truth? The ram answers only with a soft bleat, the sound of innocence untroubled by law. In that moment the Cyclops feels the division between his world and the world of men. He belongs to directness, to stone and flame, to the unbroken line. They belong to labyrinths of speech, to masks, to names that can shift like shadows. Far away, the ship rides smoother seas, but the Clever One feels unease beneath his triumph. He has won escape, yet he has awakened a god. The men whisper, some praising, some fearing, but Odysseus himself knows the weight of what he has done. To blind a giant is to blind a truth, and truths, once wounded, do not sleep quietly. The ocean beneath them hums with Poseidon's brewing anger. Though they cannot yet see the storms his trident stirs, their sails catch wind, but the wind itself has begun to listen for command. Back on the island, the Cyclops gropes his way through familiar paths. He finds water by the sound of trickling, bread by the scent of baked grain left cooling. Each step is careful, each gesture deliberate. He has been forced into patience even greater than before. Where once he ruled his cave with ease, now every movement is trial. Yet in trial there is endurance, and endurance is his craft. The smith Cyclops below mountains hammer steel from fire and ore. The herdsman Cyclops now hammers life from silence and dark. Both are makers, both are survivors. Evenings grow long. He sits at the cave mouth, listening to waves. Sometimes he imagines he can hear oars faint and ghost-like, though no ship comes. At other times he hears only the steady breathing of his sheep, the innocent cadence of a world that does not care for cunning. He wonders if one eye was always enough, or if perhaps the gods cursed his kind from the beginning with focus too pure for survival. He wonders if perhaps truth itself must wear two eyes, one to see directly and one to glance aside. Yet these are questions he cannot answer, for questions are for philosophers, and his life is pasture and fire. Still, the thought lingers, restless. He touches the scar where sight once ruled, and though he cannot see, he feels as though he has been opened to a different kind of vision, not of shapes and colours, but of loss, of the weight of betrayal, of the endurance of memory. The world now lives inside him rather than before him. It is not a gift he asked for, but perhaps even wounds become oracles when endured long enough. At times he calls again to his father, his voice breaking across the waves. Poseidon answers not with words but with the tremor of surf, with distant thunder rolling under the sea. The Cyclops feels these as assurances. The curse has been heard, vengeance is forming. He leans back, weary but certain, and lets the tide carry his rage outward while he remains, grounded by stone, soothed by wool, unyielding even in defeat. The night falls heavy once more, and stars prick the sky like distant forges. Sparks hammered from some unseen hand. The Cyclops tilts his face upward, unseeing but aware, his ear tuned to constellations whispered by wind. Somewhere across the sea, the clever one sails into storms of his own making. Here on the island, the giant remains, a figure both broken and enduring, his silence as vast as the mountain above him. The ram curls beside him, and together they breathe in rhythm, a hymn of persistence. The island sleeps, but beneath that sleep, stories stir like coals waiting to be stoked again. The island sleeps, and yet in that sleep murmurs ripple like dreams whispered from stone to sea. The Cyclops lies still against the wall of his cave, one hand resting on the fleece of the ram at his side. Though blind, his face holds the weight of vigilance, as though some inner part of him refuses to surrender watch. The scar where sight once lived pulses faintly, a reminder of flame and betrayal, but also a mark that binds him now to something greater than himself. For even in loss he feels the tether of the sea god tightening, a bond of blood and vengeance carried on every wave. Out across the dark water, the clever one's ship presses onward, its oars dipping rhythmically, its crew hushed with unease. They have escaped teeth and hand, but the memory of the eye they pierced lingers like a firebrand upon their backs. Each splash of the oars seems to echo with the Cyclops' curse. Each gust of wind whispers Poseidon's brewing wrath. The clever one stands tall at the stern, yet within him pride and dread wrestle, neither yielding. His boast has carved his name into the sea itself, and the sea will not forget. The Cyclops knows this, though he cannot see the ship shrinking into distance. He knows because silence tells him, because the rhythm of waves against the rocks speaks in a tongue older than speech. He sits through the night, listening, until he hears not the fleeing of men but the gathering of power. The tide pulls stronger. The air tastes of iron and rain, and far beneath the calm surface the deep shifts its weight. He smiles faintly, a curve of lips bitter but resolute. The sea has heard him, and the sea does not fail its own. Yet even vengeance does not quiet the loneliness of his cave. Days pass, measured not by sight but by touch and sound. He tends his flock slowly, his fingers finding grass, his ears tracing the clatter of hooves. The sheep remain his companions, their trust unbroken. They do not shrink from his ruined face, do not falter beneath his blind hand. They graze as they always have, they breathe as they always will, and in their presence the Cyclops remembers that truth still lives, though guile has wounded it. The circle of his vision may be gone, but the circle of his life continues. At night he dreams differently now. Once his dreams were meadows, endless and open, lit by a single round moon. Now they are caverns of flame, where sparks dart like voices, where hammers ring in places he has never walked but somehow knows. He dreams of Arges, Brontes, Steropes, the brothers of his lineage who dwell beneath volcanoes, forging bolts of fire for the high gods. He sees them at their anvils, their one eyes glowing with molten reflection, their hands pulling thunder from ore. In his dreams they look at him, and their gaze carries both pity and pride. Perhaps he thinks pain has made him kin to them more deeply than solitude ever did. He wakes with the smell of smoke in his nose, though no fire burns. It is the memory of their forges, drifting across dream into dawn. He strokes the ram at his side and murmurs to it of his kin, of the makers who shaped weapons that split sky and sea, who lived as exiles yet gave the gods their greatest tools. Perhaps his own story, though bitter, will serve in similar fashion to arm the sea with reason, for storm, to give his father cause for wrath. In that thought he finds a strange comfort, the sense that even brokenness can become a gift. The island grows quiet around him. Birds wheel overhead, but their cries seem distant. Fishermen in small boats pass far from shore, unwilling to near the cave of the blinded giant. The Cyclops hears them sometimes, voices carried by wind, speaking his fate with awe or fear. He does not answer. Words are for those who live by guile. His silence is heavier, more enduring. The sea will speak for him now, in tempests and shattered masts. Still, a question gnaws at him. Why one eye? Why was his kind born with singular sight, destined always to see directly, without disguise? Was it a gift or a trial? He cannot say, but in the hollow where his eye once was, he begins to feel that perhaps the gods gave his people this shape, not to bless them, but to test them. One eye cannot look away. It cannot divide itself. It is forced to see truth, to hold it without blinking. That purity is both power and peril. For men with two eyes can glance aside, can soften truth with distraction, can survive by deception, but a Cyclops he can only endure. The waves answer, rolling harder, carrying the promise of storm. Somewhere beyond the horizon, Poseidon sharpens his trident, his gaze turned toward the path of the clever one. The Cyclops lifts his head, blind but listening, and feels the vibration of that wrath building. He does not rejoice, but he steadies himself in it, like a shepherd leaning upon his staff. If he cannot see, he can still belong to the great motion of vengeance, to the tide that remembers what mortals try to forget. As the sun sets, spilling blood-red light across the cliffs, the Cyclops breathes deep. He hears the rams settle beside him, hears the flock gather near, hears the waves grind stone into sand. His cave is full of silence, yet within that silence a new truth begins to glow. His story is not ended with blindness. It has only deepened. He is more than a herdsman, robbed of sight. He is a witness, a wound that speaks, a voice that called upon the sea and was heard. And though he does not know it, his cry will echo far beyond his island, carried in songs of men who will never meet him, but will never forget the shape of his gaze. The night grows heavy, and the stars burn steadily above. The Cyclops tilts his face toward them, blind yet aware, his ear tuned to their quiet chorus. The ram breathes against his side, steady and loyal. Far away, the clever one's ship sails into gathering storms. Near at hand, the cave fills with the sound of sheep shifting in their sleep. Between these distances, the story stretches, unbroken, waiting for the next turn of fate's hand. The story stretches, as though the loom of the world has caught it in its warp, and the Cyclops remains seated in his cave, a blind figure listening to the weaving of destiny. His hand never leaves the fleece of the ram at his side, as if touch itself were now the only thread connecting him to clarity. The air smells of lanolin, of stone warmed by fading sun, of sea spray blown into cavern mouths. His flock murmurs, shifting with the night, and he hears each sound as distinctly as once he saw their shapes. Blindness has sharpened other senses, gifting him a strange new focus, one made not of light but of resonance. Far beyond his island, the clever one sails through waters that begin to curl with Poseidon's displeasure. Clouds gather, subtle at first, then thickening like clenched brows. The wind shifts, irregular, carrying salt more bitter than before. His men row, their backs aching, their hands blistered, whispering prayers to any god who might hear. Yet every dip of the oar seems to stir the sea into further unease, as though the ocean itself resents their presence. Odysseus, prideful, holds the tiller firm, but in his heart he knows the curse has taken root. The Cyclops does not see these storms, but he senses them. The ground beneath his cave trembles faintly. A warning passed up through layers of stone. He tilts his head, listening, and hears the sea's distant roar, louder than it should be, angrier than the tide alone could manage. He smiles faintly, not with joy but with grim recognition. His father has heard. His pain has been answered with motion. Vengeance is no longer wish but element. Yet as storms brew afar, the island itself remains deceptively calm. Meadows glow under moonlight, the flock grazes with steady rhythm, and the cliffs gleam like pale sentinels. Mortals might think nothing has changed, but the Cyclops feels otherwise. The island breathes differently now, its silence weighted, as though it too carries his wound. He wonders if the land itself shares his sorrow, if the stone that shaped him now mourns the truth torn from his gaze. Such thoughts keep him awake when his flock sleeps, turning him inward to questions larger than vengeance. He thinks of his kin, of Argies, Brontes and Steropes hammering beneath volcanoes, their sparks rising like stars. He wonders if they feel his pain, if the rhythm of their anvils faltered when his cry struck the air. In dreams he had seen them looking at him, their one eyes glowing with molten sympathy. Perhaps they too know what it is to be mistrusted, to be used for gifts yet feared for honesty. In their solitude he sees his own, a people scattered, never gathered, never united, because unity would make their directness too powerful. Perhaps this was the god's design all along. The ram nudges him, pulling him from thought. He strokes its horns slowly, grateful for its nearness. Among all things, only the animals have remained loyal, without suspicion, without deceit. Their trust is simple, direct, as his own sight once was. He whispers to the ram, not words for gods, but for creatures who listen without judgment, that he longs for the meadow without shadow, for the days when his gaze was whole, for the weight of truth that was both blessing and burden. His voice breaks, yet the ram presses closer, answering with a low, steady bleat. He leans back against the wall, fingers tracing grooves in the rock. Once those grooves were just marks of time and erosion. Now they feel like scripture. Perhaps every stone has been writing stories all along, waiting for hands to read them. His blindness has forced him into such readings, into finding meaning in what was always present but overlooked. He wonders if this is another kind of vision, given not to replace but to transform. Meanwhile, the clever one's ship groans under rain. Lightning spears the sky, thunder rolls like mountains shifting, and waves rear as though alive. The men cry out, clinging to the sides, and Odysseus curses himself even as he clings to pride. Each surge of water feels like the Cyclops' hand reaching from afar, each gust of wind like the breath of Poseidon answering his son's wound. The sea has become the giant's weapon, his reach extended far beyond the cave. And yet in his cave the Cyclops feels not triumph but weariness. Vengeance does not restore what was lost. The circle of his vision remains gone. The scar remains raw. He has given his pain to the sea, and the sea has made use of it. But he remains alone with his flock, his silence, his questions. He wonders if truth itself is always punished when it stands unyielding, if guile will always outmaneuver directness. His heart grows heavy with the thought, but he does not release it. He endures because endurance is the craft of his kind. The night deepens, and stars burn cold above the island. The Cyclops tilts his head toward their light, though he cannot see it, and listens instead to their silence. He feels as though they gaze back, many-eyed, indifferent, yet constant. In their distant fire he senses both alienation and belonging, as though the cosmos itself shares his solitude. He breathes slowly, the ram's warmth against him. The seas roar far away, storms raging where he cannot follow. And so the tale holds its breath again, balanced between cave and ocean, between blindness and vengeance. The Cyclops rocks gently with the rhythm of his flock, his thoughts drifting like sparks in the dark, while out on the horizon, the clever one struggles through storms that will not forget the name he gave. The storms roll on the horizon like beasts unchained, and the clever one's vessel staggers through their teeth. Yet the island remains still, a world apart. In the Cyclops cave the night is filled only with the sound of rams breathing, the faint clatter of hooves upon stone, and the tide whispering its eternal hymn outside. The giant sits with his back to the wall, his head bowed as though listening to something deep inside the earth. His hand rests upon the ram's fleece, steady as stone, though within him thoughts churn like seas unseen. He turns inward to the shape of his own being. Why had he been given one eye, and not two? Was it curse or gift? Before, he had not questioned. It had been simple. One gaze, pure and whole, undistracted. But now, robbed of that circle, he is forced to ponder what it meant. Perhaps the gods, in their irony, gave his kind one eye, not for focus but for fate, so that when that single light was extinguished, the darkness would be total. Two eyes might still have left a remnant, a path to compromise, but one eye, taken, makes the void absolute. The Cyclops feels the cruelty of this design, and yet he also feels the solemnity. To hold such purity of sight is to risk everything when it fails. The ram shifts beside him, and he leans into its warmth. Animals ask no such questions. They eat, they sleep, they breathe. They do not wrestle with destiny. Yet the Cyclops cannot free himself from these thoughts. In his silence he imagines his kin below volcanoes, striking anvils with certainty, shaping thunder for gods who do not love them, but require their labour. They too have one eye, and perhaps in every strike of their hammers they ask the same question he does in his dark. Is this single circle of vision a blessing to focus, or a flaw to be mocked and punished? His memory wanders back to his youth, when the island first seemed wide and endless. He remembers chasing lambs across meadows where dew shone like spilled pearls, remembers lying on his back and staring into the sky, his one eye drinking in the dome entire. Then it had felt enough, more than enough. The whole of heaven fit into the circle of his gaze. He had never thought of it as lack. Only now, broken, does he feel the sharpness of that difference. Yet even in regret, a strange pride stirs. To see with one eye is to see wholly, without distraction. Perhaps men fear that more than they admit. The sea moans louder, as though answering his thoughts. He knows his father moves upon the waters, shaping storms against the clever one who named himself. He wonders what vengeance will look like, whether it will be shipwrecks scattered across strange coasts, or wandering years in seas that refuse to give harbour. He wonders if Odysseus, clever and proud, will ever remember the face of the Cyclops when waves close around him. This thought comforts him, though comfort sits strangely on his shoulders now. At times he stands, feeling his way along the cave's walls. His hands learn every groove, every crack, every scar in the stone, until the cave itself feels like an extension of his body. Where once his eye had commanded space, now his palms and feet trace it with care. It is slower, but it is sure. He discovers that blindness has not erased his world, only rewritten it in different script. He reads it with skin, with ear, with patience. Perhaps even this is a lesson, that vision is not only the province of eyes, but of all things willing to focus. And still, the ram follows him, its hooves echo close behind, its breath constant, its body brushing his leg. The Cyclops finds himself speaking to it more than to the gods. He tells it of meadows he once saw, of stars that glittered like sparks, of fire that bent to his will. The ram listens, and though it cannot answer in words, its silence is gentler than any reply. In that companionship, the Cyclops feels less forsaken, as if truth, though wounded, still abides somewhere in wool and patience. The island slumbers under stars, but in distant lands, stories of him are already growing. Sailors whisper of the blinded giant, of the trickster who escaped by guile, of the curse that rides the sea like an unseen prow. Some tales mock, others mourn, but all repeat the image of the round, blazing eye undone. He has become symbol as much as being, and symbols, once born, do not die easily. The Cyclops senses this. Though he cannot hear the songs themselves, he feels it in the weight of silence, in the way the sea carries his cry farther than he can walk. He is no longer only a herdsman with sheep. He is wound and warning, exile and endurance. The thought does not soothe, but it steadies him, like leaning on a staff when the path is steep. Outside, the surf beats the rocks, steady, patient, eternal. The Cyclops listens to it, and in its rhythm he hears both sorrow and promise. The ram lowers itself to rest at his side, and together they breathe with the tide. Above them the stars burn, unseen yet felt, indifferent yet enduring. Somewhere across the dark sea, storms gather still, and the clever one sails toward trials he cannot yet imagine. On the island, the Cyclops waits, a figure blind but unbroken, his silence filling the cave like a second fire. The cave settles into a rhythm of silence, broken only by the shifting of hooves and the hush of waves beyond the mouth. The Cyclops breathes slowly, his body heavy against the wall, yet his thoughts wander far. The scar of his ruined eye throbs faintly, like a wound that remembers more than it feels. He strokes the ram's fleece with one hand, the motion steady, as though anchoring himself to a truth that guile cannot undo. He thinks of the clever one, whose name he has carved into memory like a mark upon stone. Odysseus, forever bound to him now, a man of two eyes who won through deceit what strength could never claim. The Cyclops whispers the name again, into the dark, letting it fall heavy, like a stone sinking into deep water. He knows it will carry across waves, that it has already reached the trident-bearing hand of his father. The thought steadies him, though steadiness is not peace. Outside, the night sky turns slowly, stars wheeling in cold procession. The Cyclops cannot see them, yet he feels their presence like distant forges hammering in rhythm. He imagines his kin beneath Etna's sparks rising around their shoulders, their single eyes glowing with fire. He wonders if they have paused, sensing his wound, if their anvils have struck softer in mourning, or perhaps they hammer harder, channeling his pain into the bolts they fashion, each weapon forged with his cry embedded in its flame. In that imagining, he finds kinship across distance. The ram shifts against him, and he bends his head closer, speaking softly. He tells it of meadows he once saw, of mornings when dew painted every blade of grass, when the horizon opened unbroken, and his eye drank the world whole. The ram listens, chewing slowly, as though to swallow his memories along with its grass. To share those visions with a creature that still sees feels like an act of survival, as if part of his lost sight lives on through the animal's gaze. He rises at last, groping along the wall with practiced patience. His hand knows every fissure, every seam of stone, until the cave feels like a map written in his skin. He makes his way to the mouth and lifts his face into the salt wind. The sea speaks to him in deep rhythms, waves pounding like a heart, spray whispering against cliff rock, gulls wheeling above with cries sharp as knives. The world is not hidden from him. It only speaks differently now. He listens as though the ocean itself were an oracle. In that listening he feels the pull of fate. His blindness is not only wound but doorway, opening him to truths unseen by eyes. He feels the weight of his kind's destiny, scattered yet bound by a single circle of sight. The smiths who arm gods, the herdsmen who guard caves, all share the burden of directness. Perhaps the gods feared it. That is why they left Cyclops to solitude, never gathered, never united. One gaze may be endured, but many together would pierce too deeply. In his loss he begins to glimpse this pattern, and though it stings, it also clarifies. Meanwhile, far away, Odysseus sails under skies restless with storm. Poseidon's hand already tests him with currents twisting like serpents, with winds that turn against his sails. The clever one clings to pride, but each wave that slams his hull reminds him of the blinded giant he left behind. He may escape for a time, but the curse is seeded in every swell, waiting to bloom into tempest. The Cyclops cannot see this, but he feels it. He feels the sea's intent, vast and unyielding, moving with his pain as its compass. Back in the cave, he kneels among his sheep, pressing his forehead against wool. He breathes their warmth, grounding himself in their simplicity. They do not lie. They do not deceive. They exist in the truth of hunger, rest and care. In them he finds a reflection of what his eye once offered, directness, unbroken by guile. He wonders if perhaps he was closer to them all along than to men or gods. As night deepens, he lies upon the stone, the ram at his side, his hand resting across its back. His breathing matches the tide's rhythm, slow, steady, endless. The scar upon his brow glows faintly in his mind, not with fire but with memory. He drifts between waking and dream, hearing anvils beneath mountains, waves upon cliffs, voices of kin and gods whispering at the edge of sleep. In his dream, the single eye returns, but it does not open outward. It opens inward, glowing at the center of his chest, seeing not the world, but the essence of it. He sees the thread that binds Cyclops to gods, gods to storms, storms to mortal fates. He sees the circle unbroken, though his own sight has been shattered, and he understands dimly that his story is not an end, but a turning, one more ring in a spiral that began before him and will continue beyond. The ram stirs, waking him with a nudge. He lifts his head, listening to the hush before dawn. The meadow waits, the sea waits, the sky waits. Everything holds a stillness that feels like breath drawn before speech. The Cyclops tilts his face to the air, blind but unyielding, ready to hear what the new day will bring. The hush before dawn lengthens, as if the island itself holds its breath. The Cyclops tilts his head, the scar above his brow burning faintly as though remembering fire. His ram presses close, its warmth steady against his side, and together they wait for light. Though his eye is gone, he feels the slow unfolding of morning, the cool air shifting as shadows withdraw, the damp meadow waking under dew, the distant stir of seabirds breaking silence. Sight no longer grants him the world, yet the world still arrives by touch, by sound, by scent. In this altered clarity, he endures. When the sun rises, unseen but felt, he moves with his flock. His hand trails the stone wall as he guides them out, his ear tuned to the shuffle of hooves. Each step is sure though cautious, a map written anew. Each morning, the sheep pour into the meadow, their bleating filling the air with a chorus of innocence. He stands among them, blind but unyielding, a figure both broken and complete. To them he is not ruined. He is still shepherd, still guardian, still presence, and in that he finds dignity. Yet solitude sharpens thought. As the sheep graze, he listens inward, tracing questions that echo louder now than ever before. Why one eye? Why truth made singular? Was it to remind the world that vision, unbroken, pierces deeper than the glance of two? Or was it punishment, a design that made him and his kin always vulnerable, always a step away from ruin? His mind circles these questions like the sea circles the island, relentless and unresolved. In the distance he hears thunder rumble, not from storm above, but from within the earth. It is the song of his kin, hammering beneath volcanic vaults, their sparks hidden yet eternal. He imagines them shaping lightning for Zeus, bending iron for Poseidon, crafting treasures whose brilliance is never credited to them, but to the gods who wield them. They too know solitude. They too work unseen. He feels their presence like a pulse under his feet, a kinship of exile. The ram nudges him gently, as if pulling him back from thought. He kneels, stroking its fleece, whispering of meadows long past, skies once whole, flames that once bent at his will. The ram listens with patient silence. It does not question, does not deceive. In its simple trust, he feels the echo of what he has lost. He wonders if perhaps the truest eye is not of flesh, but of loyalty. And in that loyalty the ram sees for him. Far across the sea, Odysseus sails still. His ship groaning under the strain of storms Poseidon hurls against it. Waves rise like mountains, winds scream through rigging, and men cry out in fear. Each tempest is an echo of the Cyclops' wound, each crash of thunder a memory of the pierced eye. Though the giant cannot witness it, he feels it in his bones, the sea carrying vengeance outward like a messenger of pain. The clever one who thought himself free is now bound to wandering, his journey stretched by curses that time itself honours. Yet vengeance, though satisfying to imagine, does not ease the ache of loss. The Cyclops sits at the edge of his cave at dusk, the sea breeze tugging his hair, the scar still raw against the wind. He tilts his head upward, sensing the stars though he cannot see them. He imagines them as sparks from his brother's forges, scattered across the heavens, eternal reminders that fire never truly dies. Perhaps his own eye, though extinguished, has joined them in some way, burning now above rather than within. As night deepens, dreams return. In them his eye is restored, but it sees differently. No longer the meadow or the sheep, but threads weaving across the world. He sees Odysseus battling storms, his men clinging to timbers. He sees his brothers striking hammers beneath mountains. He sees Poseidon rising in wrath, his trident gleaming like a pillar of night. He even sees himself, blind yet enduring, a figure seated among sheep, his hand steady on the ram that guards him. The dream shows him that his story is not only his, but part of a larger circle where gods, mortals and monsters are bound by the same thread of fate. He wakes with a shudder, the ram beside him once more, the cave filled with the steady breath of his flock. The fire has long gone out, but the stone holds warmth, as though the dream itself left embers behind. He leans back against the wall, listening to the tide, and wonders if perhaps blindness has opened another eye within, one that does not look outward, but inward, towards truths that sight could not contain. The sea roars louder that night, waves pounding cliffs in relentless rhythm. He knows it is not chance, but the continuing echo of his cry carried across waters. Somewhere, the clever one sails into deeper trials, and somewhere beneath volcanoes, hammers strike in sympathy. The Cyclops sits with folded hands, blind but aware, his silence vast as the cave around him. The ram rests against his knee. The flock sighs in their sleep, and the island itself seems to breathe with him. The night holds steady, a long pause between storms. Above, unseen stars burn, and below, unseen currents shift. The Cyclops waits, his scar glowing faintly in memory, his thoughts circling still around the mystery of the single eye. The world, it seems, has not finished with him. nor with the truth he embodies. The night holds steady, but within its stillness the Cyclops feels the shifting of currents that do not touch his island, yet stir his bones. He sits cross-legged at the cave's mouth, the ram pressed against his side, the scar of his ruined sight turned toward the salt wind. He cannot see the horizon, but he feels its distance bending inward, as though fate itself is drawing tighter around him. The sea has not finished speaking. It breathes in rhythms that echo his wound, a chant that rises and falls without end. His thoughts drift once more to his brothers beneath mountains, the smiths whose one eyes glare like furnaces in the dark. He imagines their sparks flying upward, striking the heavens, scattering into constellations that men mistake for stars. Each blow of their hammers is a prayer unspoken, a rhythm older than temples. He wonders if they, too, question the single circle of vision, if in every ring of molten iron they feel the same isolation he now carries in flesh. Perhaps their fire blinds them to doubt, or perhaps the hammering itself keeps despair away. He envies their purpose while he, blind shepherd, sits with sheep and silence. Yet, even in silence, meaning creeps in. His fingers trace the ram's horns following their spiral, and he pauses as if the curve reveals something hidden. Two horns coiling in mirrored arcs, circling back toward themselves. Not one, not broken, but paired. He feels envy in that symmetry, but also wonder. Perhaps men with two eyes are like rams with two horns, less direct, more balanced, able to turn aside and survive through diversion. His kind, with one eye, one horn of truth, stride only forward, never sideways. It is noble, but it is perilous. He sighs, laying his head against the animal's warmth, and feels the ache of that truth. Far across the sea, Odysseus struggles still. Poseidon has laid storm after storm in his path, bending years into a labyrinth, scattering men and hope like leaves. Each wave that strikes him carries the memory of the Cyclops' ruined sight. Each gust of wind whispers the curse born in the cave. Though the clever one endures, though his wit guides him from shore to shore, the sea ensures he will never forget. The Cyclops does not witness this, but he senses it in the pull of tides, in the tremors that crawl through stone. He knows his pain has been made into weapon, stretched far beyond the reach of his hand. And yet, in quiet moments, he wonders if vengeance alone is enough. The curse has flown, yes, and storms have obeyed, but he remains blind and alone. Nothing can restore the circle of his sight. Nothing can return the directness that once defined him. In that absence, he feels the stir of transformation, as though the gods, by stripping him, have forced another vision upon him. He begins to sense things differently. The moods of the sea in the taste of salt, the shape of clouds in the weight of air, the quiet ache of stone, remembering its own age. Perhaps one eye lost has opened something deeper within. One evening, as the sun falls unseen, he hears voices carried by the sea. Not sailors, not fishermen, but echoes, men telling his story around distant fires. They speak of the giant blinded by guile, of the clever hero who escaped. Some laugh, some shudder, but all remember. The Cyclops tilts his head, catching the ghost of their words in the wind, and realizes he has already become more than himself. He is now a tale, a warning, a mirror for men to measure wit against strength. It stings, but it also binds him to immortality of another kind. Flesh may fade, but stories do not. The ram nuzzles him, breaking his thought. He smiles faintly, running a rough hand along its wool. Perhaps his role is not to conquer, but to embody, to live a symbol of unyielding truth. The clever may mock, the gods may fear, but the circle of the Cyclops' gaze, even broken, continues to burn in memory. He whispers to the ram that perhaps all creatures are chosen for something. Rams to lead flocks, smiths to forge thunder, men to weave deception, and Cyclopes to carry the weight of directness. Even if it breaks them, the night deepens. Stars prick the sky unseen, yet he feels them as a pressure, distant but undeniable. The sea grows restless, waves hurling themselves harder against stone. Somewhere Odysseus curses his fate, somewhere Poseidon sharpens another storm. Here the Cyclops sits in silence, listening, enduring, his scar throbbing like an ember that refuses to die. He leans back against the cave wall, the ram curled close, and breathes in rhythm with the tide. In the stillness he feels something stirring. Not vengeance, not despair, but a slow clarity, as if blindness itself has burned away distraction. He sees not with eyes but with endurance, and endurance, he realizes, is vision of its own. The cave hums with it. The flock breathes it. The sea carries it outward like a hymn. And so he waits, blind but unbroken, a figure of stone and silence, while fate moves like current toward shores yet unseen. The cave breathes around him, cool and resonant, its stone walls carrying echoes of tides beyond. The Cyclops sits with his ram pressed close, the scar of his missing eye glowing faintly in memory, though dark to the world. He has endured many nights in silence, and silence has taught him its own tongue. It tells him when the wind turns, when the sea grows restless, when stars unseen rearrange themselves above. He no longer sees, yet he perceives, and perception has become a new kind of sight. In this inward clarity, he feels the stirring of something vast, greater than storms or vengeance. It is the weight of legacy itself, settling upon his shoulders like a mantle. He is not merely a shepherd who lost his sight to mortal trickery. He is becoming symbol, embodiment, myth, the voices he once half heard in the wind. Sailors retelling his story across distant fires have multiplied. They spread like sparks, carried on trade routes, whispered in taverns, sung in courts. His name, his wound, his curse, all of it is becoming woven into the tapestry of mankind's memory. He wonders at this transformation. How strange! That blindness has opened such reach, that pain has granted him a voice louder than his roar ever was. His gaze was once a circle of truth, unblinking, unbending, and it terrified mortals who lived by guile. Now that circle has become absence, yet the absence itself speaks more loudly than sight. It reminds men of what they fear most, a truth that cannot be evaded, a judgment that cannot look away. Even broken, that truth endures. The ram shifts, and he strokes its fleece, speaking softly. He tells it that he has become more than himself, though he did not choose it. The ram listens, chewing quietly, eyes gentle in the dark. Its patience steadies him. In its silence, he feels understood. The flock grazes nearby, they're breathing a soft hymn that fills the cave with life. Among them he is still shepherd, still part of the circle of earth and beast, even as myth pulls him outward into eternity. Far away, Odysseus staggers beneath Poseidon's wrath. The storms never cease. The seas twist into labyrinths. Each shore promises rest only to snatch it away. The clever one grows weary. His men fall one by one, and each loss echoes the cry of the blinded giant. The Cyclops senses this in tremors beneath the ground, in the rhythm of waves that pound cliffs harder than before. His curse has taken root, stretching across years, bending fate itself. He cannot see the clever one suffering, but he feels the pattern. Guile cannot walk unpunished, no matter how long the journey. And yet, in his heart, the Cyclops does not rejoice. Vengeance has its place, but it does not heal. The wound of his lost sight remains, and no storm across the world can return it. Instead, he finds himself drawn into reflection. Perhaps one eye was never meant only to see pasture and meadow. Perhaps it was always meant to pierce deeper, to endure until it became symbol. His scar, raw and hollow, now glows like an inner fire. It is as though his sight, extinguished outward, has been lit inward. At times he dreams of his kin beneath volcanoes. He sees them at their anvils, sparks rising like constellations, thunder rolling in their hands. They glance toward him, their one eyes full of recognition, and in their gaze he finds kinship stronger than solitude. They too are exiles. They too live under mistrust, serving gods who wield their creations but never honor their names. He wakes from these dreams with tears he cannot see, but the tears fall warm against his face, reminding him that he is not entirely alone in his burden. The island holds him still, a world of stone and pasture, but he feels the circle of his story widening. He imagines future generations speaking of him not as shepherd, but as symbol of unbroken truth, wounded by guile. He wonders if they will fear him, pity him, or revere him. Perhaps all three. The thought does not unsettle him. He has lived long enough to know that truth, once loosed, does not return to silence. Evening falls, the sea glowing faintly with the last embers of sun. He sits at the cave mouth, the ram at his side, listening to the tide. He tilts his face upward, blind to the stars but aware of their patient fire. He feels as though one of them belongs to him now. His lost eye kind's figured into a spark above, watching still. He whispers this to the ram, and though the beast cannot answer, its steady breathing tells him the thought is not folly. The wind shifts, carrying scents of salt and rain. He knows a storm brews beyond sight, perhaps another wrought by his father's trident, perhaps only the sea's own will. Either way, he feels it as part of his being. He has become storm and silence both, wound and warning. His story no longer belongs only to him. It belongs to sea, to gods, to mortals who will speak his name across ages. The night deepens, waves pounding like drums. The Cyclops sits unmoving, scar glowing faintly, ram pressed close, flock murmuring in their sleep. He endures, as he always has, but now endurance itself has become vision, and somewhere across dark seas, storms still hunt the clever one, carrying the memory of a single, unblinking gaze that no guile could ever escape. The night pounds with drums of surf, and yet within the cave the Cyclops sits, unmoving, a figure carved from shadow, his ram pressed close, his flock shifting like whispers in straw. His scar throbs, not with fresh pain but with memory, a reminder that the circle once whole has been broken, and that break has sent ripples across sea and time. He listens, and in listening he perceives more than sight could grant. The sea beyond is not only water and wave, but voice, carrying hymns of vengeance and echoes of his name. Dawn comes, not in light for him, but in warmth, brushing his skin, in the stir of gulls, in the restless murmur of sheep. Eager for pasture, he rises slowly, guiding them out by touch and sound, his hand grazing the wall, his staff testing stone. In the meadow they spread, a white constellation across green, and he stands among them, blind yet centered, a stillness at the heart of their wandering. They do not doubt him. Their trust binds him to earth more securely than sight ever did. As they graze, his mind drifts. He recalls meadows of his youth, when he lay on his back and drank the whole sky with his single eye. Then he had felt nothing lacking. That circle of vision seemed enough to contain the dome of heaven. Only now, in absence, does he feel the edge of difference. Yet in remembering, he also recalls pride, that to see directly, unbroken, was a gift no guile could fracture. Even if cunning has wounded him, that pride endures like a hidden ember. He imagines Odysseus on the sea, buffeted still by storms that bear Poseidon's breath. He cannot see the clever one's struggle, but he senses it in the weight of tides, in the groan of distant currents. Each wave that strikes that wandering ship is part of his wound extended outward, each gust of contrary wind an echo of his roar. The thought steadies him, though it does not soothe. Vengeance is a current that flows outward, but it cannot flow back into his hollow eye. That emptiness remains, demanding reflection. He turns inward again to the riddle of his kind. Why one eye? Why truth-shaped singular? Unable to glance aside, he wonders if the gods feared what two eyes might see together. If such clarity would pierce their own disguises, perhaps one eye was their compromise, granting power but not dominion, focus but not multiplicity. Yet he cannot dismiss the cruelty of it, that when one circle is extinguished, darkness becomes complete. To carry such purity is noble, but it is also perilous. His scar is proof of that. At times he dreams of his brothers beneath volcanoes, their sparks rising through vents into night skies. He sees them hammering bolts of thunder, shaping storms in secret. Their one eye is burning with molten light. They do not speak in his dreams, but their gazes tell him they know his pain, that they too live in solitude, crafting gifts for gods who both fear and need them. He wakes from these visions with the taste of ash in his mouth, tears warm upon his cheeks, and yet in that grief he feels kinship. He is not alone in exile. The ram nudges him as if to remind him of present ground. He kneels, pressing his forehead to its horns, breathing the scent of wool and grass. He whispers to it of stars he once saw, of flames he once tended, of meadows where truth seemed eternal. The ram listens, its silence gentler than words. Perhaps this is the truest vision, to be seen not by eyes but by loyalty, to be known without disguise. He feels gratitude then, not for vengeance or memory, but for this simple companionship that binds him still to life. As evening falls, he returns to the cave, the sea's voice louder than usual, the air heavy with salt. He sits at the entrance, staff across his knees, and tilts his face upward. He cannot see the stars, but he feels their pressure, their countless gazes cast upon the earth. He imagines his own lost eye among them, burning as one more spark. Watching him from above, the thought steadies him, giving shape to absence. Perhaps no wound is wholly loss. Perhaps every break transforms into a new form of vision. The sea crashes louder, and he knows storms brew beyond his hearing. Perhaps another wrought by Poseidon's trident. Perhaps only the ocean's will. He does not distinguish both the truth, and truth needs no adornment. He leans against the wall, breathing with the rhythm of tide and flock, feeling his scar glow faintly in memory. Endurance has become his new sight, and endurance never lies. Night deepens, sheep sigh in their sleep. The ram presses close, and the Cyclops waits, blind yet aware, scarred yet unbroken. His story stretches outward still, carried on currents, whispered in myths, remembered in fear and awe. Somewhere Odysseus wanders, somewhere Poseidon broods. Here the Cyclops remains, rock among waves, his silence vast as the sky above him, his presence the unyielding witness of a truth that will not fade. The silence of the cave deepens as night folds itself around the island. Yet within that silence, the Cyclops feels the stirrings of a world larger than his solitude. He leans against the wall, the ram curled faithfully by his side, the flock breathing in rhythm with the tide beyond. His scar burns faintly, not with fire but with remembrance, and he lets it guide his thoughts outward, into distances he cannot see. He senses the clever one wandering still, though leagues of water separate them. Odysseus carries storms like shadows, his path twisted by the curse uttered here. The Cyclops imagines him standing at the helm of his battered ship, eyes scanning horizons that never yield home. Each wave that resists him feels like an extension of his wound, each gust a whisper of his name. It is strange to think that guile, once triumphant, is now shackled by a shepherd's roar. Vengeance moves slowly, but it does not fail. Yet vengeance alone cannot fill the void, where sight once ruled. The Cyclops turns his thoughts to deeper mysteries, to the circle that once defined his gaze. He wonders if one eye was not only design, but destiny, a mark that shaped not just sight, but soul. To see with one eye is to see directly, without escape, without evasion. It is a gift, yet also a burden, for such purity cannot bend. Now that circle has been shattered, but in its absence he perceives another truth, that the single gaze, once unbroken, has not vanished, but multiplied. It lives now in memory, in story, in symbol. His blindness has not ended his vision. It has spread it. He dreams of his kin beneath mountains once more. Sparks leap from anvils. Molten rivers flow through caverns. Thunder is shaped by hammers that know no rest. Their one eyes burn bright, focused on flame and awe, and in their focus he sees himself reflected. They too carry solitude. They too live without guile. Their creations arm gods, who stride across heaven, yet their names are seldom sung. He wakes from these visions with ash upon his tongue, and the faint ringing of hammers in his ear. Perhaps his wound binds him closer to them than ever before. For all Cyclopes carry exile, each in their own way. The ram stirs, and he presses his hand to its fleece. He whispers that truth may be scorned, yet it cannot be erased. Even if mortals laugh, even if gods mistrust, truth endures like stone beneath soil, like fire beneath ash. The ram listens, eyes steady, chewing slowly, and in its quiet patience the Cyclops finds comfort. Loyalty, he thinks, is its own kind of sight, an eye that cannot be extinguished. Evening deepens, and the sea grows louder, its waves striking cliffs with deliberate force. He tilts his face toward the wind, inhaling salt and rain. He knows storms brew, perhaps guided by Poseidon, perhaps born of the sea's own will. He does not distinguish, for both serve truth. He rocks slightly as he sits, breathing with the tide, his body aligning with forces greater than himself. Blind though he is, he feels connected to the pattern of world and myth. His wound is not merely his own, it belongs now to sea and storm, to tale and time. He imagines future generations speaking of him, children gathered by fires, sailors whispering across harbours, poets shaping verses. They will tell of the giant who saw too directly, who was undone by cunning, whose roar bent the sea itself. Some will fear, some will mock, some will ponder, but all will remember. His scar, unseen by them, will burn through story, a reminder of the danger and nobility of unbroken truth. He does not smile, but he feels a gravity in this, an immortality not of body, but of presence. The flock gathers close as night cools the cave. Their wool brushes his legs, their warmth surrounds him. For a moment he feels less alone, held within a circle of simple beings who know nothing of guile or vengeance. They live in hunger, in rest, in loyalty, and in that they mirror the clarity his eye once gave. He wonders if perhaps the gods, in their fear of Cyclopean focus, overlooked the greater truth, that loyalty, that patience, that endurance are stronger than cunning's fleeting victory. The stars wheel unseen overhead. The surf booms like a heartbeat, and the Cyclops sits unmoving, scar glowing faintly in memory. He has become more than shepherd, more than giant, more than wound. He is now symbol, woven into the fabric of story itself. Somewhere, Odysseus still wanders. Somewhere, Poseidon still broods. Here the Cyclops waits, blind but aware, scarred but enduring, his silence vast, his presence unyielding. The night breathes on, deep and heavy, and the island seems to lean closer, as though listening for the next turn of fate. The island leans closer, or so it feels to the Cyclops as he sits with his flock, listening to the night breathe. The scar across his brow glows faintly in memory, and though his eye is gone, the absence has become its own form of vision. He senses currents shifting beyond the cliffs, the sea whispering of distant trials. Odysseus wanders still, hemmed in by storms that never cease, storms birthed from his curse, storms carried by Poseidon's will. The Cyclops cannot see him, but he feels the thread that binds them still taut across the waters, a tether woven by pain and defiance. The ram presses against him, warm and steady. He strokes its fleece, finding comfort in its silence, in its unbroken trust. The flock gathers near, their breaths weaving a chorus softer than song, reminding him that though men deceive and gods punish, Life continues in its simplest truths. These creatures live without guile, without questions, guided only by hunger and belonging. In them he finds reflection of what his one eye once offered. Clarity, unbroken and unadorned. He tilts his head upward, blind to the stars yet aware of their presence. He imagines his lost eye burning among them, transformed into a celestial spark that watches without blinking. Perhaps this is the god's secret gift, that when truth is wounded on earth, it is lifted into the heavens to shine forever. The thought steadies him, a quiet comfort amid solitude, but the silence of night carries more than peace. Beneath it hums the weight of transformation. He feels it in the stone that cradles his back, in the tide that pounds the shore, in the air thick with salt and omen. He is no longer merely a wounded shepherd. He has become vessel of story, his presence stretching beyond the island. Sailors whisper of him, poets begin to shape verses, children listen wide-eyed to the tale of the blinded giant whose roar bent the sea. The Cyclops does not hear these words, yet he feels their gravity in the very way the air moves, heavy with memory not yet written down but already alive. In his dreams the circle of his eye returns, but not as flesh. It appears as fire within, a ring that glows in his chest, casting light upon truths invisible to ordinary sight. He sees Odysseus stumbling upon strange shores, his men weary, his heart heavy. He sees Poseidon raising storms, his trident thrumming with wrath inherited from his son's wound. He sees his kin beneath volcanoes, sparks flying as they forge, their one eyes bright with focus and exile. And he sees himself, blind yet enduring, seated in silence with his ram, a witness to a pattern larger than his own grief. He wakes with tears warm on his cheeks, though he cannot see them fall. Each dawn he leads his flock to meadow. His staff tests the ground, his ear maps the world, his hand grazes stone as if reading its history. The sheep trust him, follow him, breathe with him. To them, nothing has changed. He is still their guardian, still their voice, still their presence. In their innocence lies healing, a reminder that even broken truth is still truth. Yet inwardly he wonders, is his blindness punishment or initiation? The gods may have feared the clarity of the Cyclopes, their single gaze piercing too directly. By stripping him of it, have they forced him toward another vision, one that looks not outward but inward into essence and fate? His scar burns as he ponders, as if affirming that wounds themselves can become oracles. Evenings bring heavier waves, the sea restless, as though carrying news. He listens and feels the clever one still wandering, storms dogging him, islands refusing welcome. The curse has grown into labyrinth, and Odysseus must walk it step by step. The Cyclops does not rejoice, but he feels balance. Truth cannot be evaded forever. Guile may wound, but the wound shapes destiny. He leans against the wall of his cave as night deepens, the ram at his side, the flock sighing in sleep. His breath matches the tide, his silence vast as the sky he cannot see. He has become symbol, whether he wills it or not. A shepherd turned into myth, a wound turned into story, a blindness turned into vision. Somewhere Odysseus wanders, somewhere Poseidon broods. Here the Cyclops endures, scarred but unbroken, his presence carved into the fabric of memory. The night hums on, carrying both sorrow and strength. The island waits, the sea waits, the stars wait as though poised for the next motion in the circle of fate. The Cyclops breathes, steady as stone. Listening to it all is silence already part of eternity. The night hums on, and when dawn at last brushes the island with warmth, the Cyclops rises slowly, feeling the meadow call his flock. His staff touches the ground ahead of him, the ram pressing faithfully at his side, the sheep stirring into motion with gentle bleats. He guides them outward, step by careful step, until they scatter across grass still jeweled with dew. Though he cannot see them, He feels their presence in sound and scent, the soft rhythm of their grazing, the muted thrum of life continuing as it always has. In their simplicity lies a truth older than wounds. He sits in the meadow, the wind moving across his face, and leans into its whisper. It carries salt, the distant cries of gulls, and the faint thunder of waves breaking far below. But it also carries stories. He hears them in undertones, as if the sea itself repeats what mortals say of him. Some call him monster, some victim, some caution, some wonder. His name travels farther than his feet ever could, etched into the minds of those who have never seen his cave, never touched his island's stone. This realization does not swell him with pride, nor does it wound him further. It humbles him. He has become part of a larger song, one that he cannot control but to which he must belong. The ram grazes close, and he rests his hand upon its back. In its steady warmth he feels anchored, reminded that his life, for all its mythic weight, is still tethered to simple needs. Grass for sheep, water for thirst, shelter for night. These things endure regardless of story, and in their endurance he finds grounding. The gods may bend seas, mortals may twist tails, but wool still grows, and flocks still follow. The Cyclops smiles faintly, a gesture unseen but true, as he realizes that this too is vision, the recognition of what remains. Still, when he tilts his head, he feels the air thick with omens. His scar burns faintly, as though the hollow left by his eye opens him to the breath of fate. He knows the clever one still wanders, storms shaping his path, his men dwindling, his pride tested. He imagines Odysseus clutching the helm of a weary ship, every gust of wind reminding him of the giant he mocked. Though oceans divide them, the tether of curse binds them like two ends of the same rope, stretched but unbroken. The Cyclops wonders if, when at last Odysseus sees his homeland again, he will still remember the gaze he extinguished. At night, dreams return. This time he dreams not only of his brothers forging beneath mountains, nor of Odysseus cast upon angry seas, but of himself standing tall upon the cliffs, his empty eye burning like a beacon. Ships pass below, and sailors bow their heads in silence, not from fear but from recognition. In the dream he is no longer monster nor victim, but guardian, the one who reminds men of truth unyielding. He wakes with breath heavy in his chest, uncertain if it is vision or longing, yet the dream lingers, glowing within like embers. The stars above wheel unseen, and he feels their pull like distant forges hammering sparks across the night. He wonders if his lost eye has joined them, not as wound but as flame, burning forever to remind the heavens that truth, once broken, does not die. He whispers this thought to the ram, and though the beast answers only with gentle chewing, the Cyclops feels as though his words are heard, carried upward by loyalty itself. The island remains quiet, but its silence now feels purposeful, as though listening. Even the cliffs, beaten endlessly by waves, seem to hold themselves straighter. Perhaps they too sense that his story has reached a new place, no longer confined to wound and vengeance, but moving toward meaning. He tilts his head, listening, and feels the truth of it. Pain has turned to symbol, symbol into legacy, legacy into something like peace. Yet peace is not complete. The scar still aches and his solitude weighs upon him. He longs for kin, for brothers at their anvils, for voices that share his burden. He wonders if he will ever hear them, if the gods will grant him such a gift. But even in longing, he endures. Endurance is his craft, and endurance is vision. The ram curls beside him as night deepens, the flocks sighing in their sleep. The cave breathes around him, stone cradling silence, tide beating its eternal hymn. He rests his hand on the ram's horns, feeling their spiral, and thinks again of circles, his lost eye, the stars above, the cycle of stories. Circles break, but they also return. He breathes in time with the sea, steady and vast, waiting for the next turn of fate's wheel. The night grows heavy, the stars unseen but felt, and the Cyclops remains, scarred but enduring, silence gathering around him like a cloak. Somewhere the clever one still wanders, but here on his island the giant waits, presence unbroken, listening to the hum of eternity. The night grows heavy, and still the Cyclops listens, his head tilted, as though the silence itself might reveal what lies beyond it. The ram breathes slow and steady against his side, its warmth constant, its patience endless. The flock murmurs in sleep, their bodies gathered close like clouds drifting across a meadow of stone. He sits with them, scar burning faintly in memory, and feels the presence of the sea beyond, the eternal pulse that binds his solitude to the vastness of the world. He senses the clever one still wandering, carried by waves that refuse to let him rest. The storms do not abate, the seas do not yield, and every shore offers trial instead of home. Odysseus, once triumphant, is now the prisoner of his own cunning, the rope of fate drawn taut by the curse uttered here. The Cyclops imagines him standing on a deck soaked with salt, eyes scanning horizons that turn always into further distance. Though he cannot see it, he feels the truth. Guile may win battles, but truth bends destiny itself. He strokes the ram's fleece, his hand lingering as though drawing strength from its softness. Loyalty remains when vision fails, and he has learned to see through presence, through endurance, through silence. Perhaps this is the final meaning of his one eye, not simply to pierce outward, but to teach him that truth does not vanish when blinded. It persists in memory, in companionship, in the slow rhythm of breath against his side. His blindness has become another kind of sight, one that opens inward. The meadow calls at dawn, and he rises with his flock. The staff guides him, his hand reading stone, his ear mapping the ground ahead. The sheep move around him in a constellation of sound, their bleats weaving the shape of pasture into his mind. He walks among them, not as wounded, but as shepherd still, and their trust affirms him. They do not see his scar as disfigurement, only as part of the presence that guards them. In their gaze, he remains whole, but the island itself feels changed, as if it too has absorbed his wound. The cliffs seem heavier, the grass quieter, the air thicker with memory. He wonders if the land carries sorrow alongside him, if the stone mourns with him, if the sea roars in sympathy. Perhaps his cry did not only reach the gods, perhaps it pierced earth itself, weaving his story into every grain of sand. The thought comforts him, for it means he is not truly alone. He dreams again of his brothers beneath mountains, their anvils ringing like heartbeats, sparks rising into constellations. This time they pause their hammering and look toward him. Their one eyes gleam not only with fire but with recognition, as though they see his scar, as though they share it. In that gaze he feels kinship deeper than words. He wakes with the sound of hammers still echoing in his chest, a rhythm that steadies him through the long night. Evenings bring stronger waves. He listens, feeling the ocean gather strength, as if preparing to strike again at the clever one. Each gust of wind carries salt sharper than before, each crash against the cliffs louder, more deliberate. The sea is restless, but not without purpose. He knows his father still moves upon it, guiding storms with the weight of his trident, remembering the wound carved into his son. The Cyclops breathes with it, his chest rising and falling in time with the tide, as though he himself were part of the sea's will. And yet, amid vengeance and storm, a gentler truth stirs within him. His scar, once only pain, has become a mark of vision. It has opened him to silence, to loyalty, to endurance. He has learned that one eye was never about quantity, but about essence, to see wholly, directly, without retreat. Even blinded, he still embodies that essence. Guile may wound, but truth, even scarred, cannot be erased. The flock settles in the cave, their wool brushing his legs, their breaths weaving a lullaby. The ram lies close, horns pressing gently against his hand, and in that spiral of bone he feels the circle of fate turning once more. His scar throbs in answer, as though reminding him that the story is not finished. He tilts his head upward, blind to the stars but aware of their pull, and imagines his lost eye burning among them, one more spark in the eternal dome. The night grows deeper, the waves pound harder, and the Cyclops waits. His silence is vast, his presence unyielding, his wound transformed into symbol. Somewhere, Odysseus still wanders, storms at his heels. Somewhere, Poseidon still broods, his trident poised. Here, the Cyclops endures, scarred but whole in his endurance, waiting as the world bends toward the next turn of fate. The night folds deep around the cave, a cloak woven from silence and the patient roar of the sea. The Cyclops sits unmoving, his ram against his side, the flock pressed close as though they sense the weight of something approaching. His scar pulses faintly, not with pain but with a rhythm that feels older than his own life, as though it echoes from the very bones of the earth. He listens, and in the listening he hears not only waves and wind but the hum of destiny itself, circling, returning, drawing tight. The dawn that follows is pale and soft, warming his skin, filling the meadow with scents of dew and grass. He guides the flock outward, each step measured, his staff tapping, his ears shaping the world into presence. The sheep scatter, and he stands among them, blind yet steady, a stillness at the heart of their movements. He does not need sight to know he belongs here. Their trust enfolds him, and in that trust he remains whole. Yet even as he breathes in the sweetness of grass, he feels the press of something greater. His solitude is no longer only personal. It is the solitude of a symbol, a truth carried by time itself. He tilts his head toward the sea, sensing Odysseus still wandering. The clever one's path has grown long and tangled, each shore another trial, each storm another weight. Pride remains in him, but weariness gnaws. The Cyclops feels it, as though the tether between them carries not only vengeance but echo of sorrow. He wonders if Odysseus, in the quietest hours, recalls the eye he extinguished, the name he provoked, the truth he could not escape. If so, then the curse is not only storms but memory itself, pressing endlessly upon the mind. That night, sleep carries the Cyclops into dream. He dreams of circles, his own lost eye, the spiral of the ram's horns, the stars burning in their endless wheel above. In the dream, these circles merge, forming one great ring that binds sea, sky, earth, and fire. He sees himself seated within it, no longer merely shepherd, but guardian of a truth too vast for men to hold. He sees Odysseus too, caught in that circle, wandering yet always within its boundary. He sees gods themselves leaning close, wary of its strength, unwilling to admit how much they fear what it represents. He wakes with the dream burning in his chest, breath heavy, the scar glowing like ember. The island seems changed in the wake of that vision. The cliffs rise taller, the sea roars louder, the grass leans as though bowing. He feels the land itself honoring his endurance, carrying his cry within its silence. Perhaps the island has become his companion, just as the ram has, just as the flock has. Perhaps it too holds his truth, and will bear it forward long after his body has turned to stone. The thought steadies him, filling him with a gravity that does not crush but anchors. Evenings stretch long, the sea restless with purpose. He listens, feeling its strength gather as though preparing some final movement in the great story. He does not fear it. Endurance has taught him that truth, though wounded, cannot be erased. His scar is no longer mark of defeat, but seal of transformation, a sign that even broken vision can become eternal. He strokes the ram's fleece, whispers to it of meadows and skies once seen, and though he cannot see now, the memory glows within like fire banked against night. The flock settles in, their warmth pressing around him. He feels their breaths, hears their quiet sighs, and in their innocence he finds the essence of his own strength. They remind him that truth is not only storm and vengeance, but also loyalty, patience, presence. These two are circles, unbroken, enduring. The scar burns faintly once more, and he tilts his face upward, blind but aware. The stars press upon the night, unseen yet felt, and he imagines his lost eye among them, burning steady as reminder and as guide. Perhaps it does not watch only him, but all who walk under heaven, whispering of the cost and nobility of truth. The sea beats louder, as though heralding change. The Cyclops breathes with it, steady, enduring, presence vast as stone. Somewhere, Odysseus still wanders. Somewhere, Poseidon still broods. Here the giant waits, scarred but steadfast, silence wrapped around him like mantle, as though the world itself pauses before the last turning of fate's great circle. The sea beats louder, each wave striking the cliffs as though it were a final declaration. The Cyclops sits unmoving at the cave's mouth, Ram at his side, Flock breathing in the stillness behind. His scar glows faintly in the night, not as wound but as emblem, the seal of a life that has become more than flesh. He tilts his head, listening to the vast hush that follows each crash of surf, and in that hush he hears completion. The circle that once defined his vision, broken by guile, now returns in another form, no longer in his brow, but in his silence, in his endurance, in the story that will live beyond him. The dawn comes quietly, soft warmth upon his skin, meadows silvered with dew. He rises with his staff, guides the flock outward, step by step, his hand grazing stone, his ear shaping the pasture into presence. The sheep scatter, their bleats weaving constellations around him. Though blind, he knows each sound, each shift of air, each hoof upon earth. He belongs among them, as he always has. But now he understands that his presence carries more than guardianship of flock. It carries memory, legacy, truth. He breathes deeply, salt and grass mingling on the wind, and tilts his face toward the horizon he cannot see. Somewhere far away, Odysseus reaches at last for shores that promise home. Though storms have thinned his crew and broken his pride, the Cyclops senses it. The thread of fate stretched to its end. The clever one will find land, but never freedom from memory. Each hearth fire, each wave upon Ithaca's shore will remind him of the cave, of the giant he blinded, of the curse that shadowed every mile of his journey. This too is part of the circle. Guile achieves victory, yet truth writes the ending. At night, dreams return for the last time. He sees himself standing on a plain where stars descend like sparks from a forge, waves rise like walls of glass, and mountains glow with fire. In the center of it all burns a single circle, vast and radiant, containing earth, sea, and sky. Within it, he sees all Cyclopes, his brothers, beneath volcanoes, himself among sheep. Even others unnamed, scattered across legend. They share the same gaze, the same solitude, the same burden, yet together their one eyes do not seem broken or limited. They seem complete, a constellation of circles, each burning with directness. He wakes with calm in his chest, the dream lingering not as ache, but as peace. The island itself seems to lean closer, as though listening with reverence. The cliffs stand tall, the grass bends in wind, the stones hum softly beneath his hand. He understands now. His cry was carved into the world, into sea and land, into story and memory. He is no longer only shepherd, no longer only victim of guile. He is guardian of a truth greater than himself, a truth that mortals will whisper, gods will recall, and stars will hold forever. The flock returns to the cave at dusk, their warmth surrounding him as night descends. He rests his hand on the ram's horns, feeling the spiral, the eternal circle. His scar pulses once more, but gently, almost tenderly, as though acknowledging that the journey is complete. He leans back against the wall, his breath steady, his silence vast as the ocean beyond. Above, stars burn unseen, yet he feels their presence pressing upon him. Among them he imagines his lost eye, no longer wound but flame, watching not only him but all who walk under heaven. It glows as reminder, as witness, as guide, that truth may be wounded but never erased, that directness endures beyond guile, that endurance itself is vision. The sea roars on, waves pounding cliffs in eternal rhythm, but to the Cyclops it no longer sounds like lament. It sounds like him, carrying his story outward to every shore. Sailors will whisper it, poets will shape it, children will hear it by firelight. His name will live not as shadow but as symbol, his scar not as shame, but as meaning. The night grows still. The ram breathes steady at his side, the flock sighs in sleep, and the Cyclops sits unmoving, presence carved into silence. He has become what he was always meant to be, not only giant of stone and flesh, but circle of truth, unbroken even in blindness. And so his story rests, not in storm or vengeance, but in reflection. He endures as memory, as symbol, as witness. The sea carries him, the stars hold him, the earth remembers him. The circle returns, whole at last, and in that wholeness the Cyclops is at peace,